It is time to talk about another book. This time it was Supercommunicators by Charles Duhigg. Very interesting, and we're definitely going to have some fun talking about it. So he also wrote The Power of Habit, and it's right there. Where I think this fits into some of the conversation about neurodiversity and that environment, there were two key areas in particular that he really got me thinking. And not so much thinking, he confirmed through some of the reports that he noted that people, one of them in particular was the fact that for some people, when someone is a super communicator, and I should probably just start there and explain what he considers a super communicator. So a super communicator is someone that can easily, it appears, easily and effortlessly engages in conversation with most people. And they're really super communicators if they help shift conversations to balance things out, if they help people work through things, like those are considered super communicators. One of the fun facts I'll get into. So super communicators might ask a question like this: what is the best conversation you've had recently, and what made it go well? Or they might ask this: what's the worst conversation you've had recently, and why did it feel like it tanked so bad? It's good to answer those questions. It's good to have those kind of conversations. So I've explained a little bit about it. I'm going to go back to some other questions that he offered up and cover a few of the chapters that I thought are well worth reviewing if you're going through the book or just have a small amount of time. One thing that was interesting in particular was just the fact that not always are we able to meet another person's communication style. And I will get into that because that is the breakdown in particular in communication. So some other questions. Oh, this was great. He talked about something called the 36 questions from the Fast Friends procedure. I highly recommend you Google this, or you use whatever device you want to use, some form of AI, and look into that. Here's a couple of examples of that type of question and why it's interesting. If you could invite anyone to a dinner party, who would it be? Or what would you change about how you were raised? Very interesting questions. Now, can you imagine yourself sitting down with a perfect stranger, and these are the types of questions you actually have with them the first time you meet them? They have found this 36 questions Fast Friends procedure. They have found that this is actually how you become fast friends, is by getting down to the being vulnerable, showing your kindness, showing your humanity sooner than later. Here's a couple of other great items. We all, right, contain a multitude of selves. And this was a question he has. How do your various identities impact how you communicate? In particular, that makes me think about masking. If we're masking, we are thereby behaving in a different self. And how do those various identities impact how you communicate? Well, obviously, quite a bit. If I'm masking in a situation to not be identified in certain ways and possibly discriminated against, I'm going to communicate differently, less in particular, probably. How do you ask other people about their experiences, values, and beliefs? There's a fun question I highly recommend you take a moment to answer. Another one: what's one thing you do really well when you communicate? And what's something you would like to improve about your communication? And that thing that you would like to improve about communication, what are you willing to do to shift it? Right? Great questions. Again, I'm a coach. I love questions like that. Here's a really simple explanation for you. When we are speaking to each other, but are having different kinds of conversations, so we're not actually connecting with each other. And that's why we feel not heard and not valued. So in particular, we want to be able to recognize the type of conversation we're having and then decide if we want to match that conversation to actually engage more and really be connected. Research has shown that connecting with others is the most important goal of any conversation. And one way to connect is by matching the kind of conversation you're having. So he does get into the types of conversations, and there are 3 in particular that he talks about. They are, what's this really about? So an explaining, very literal type of thing, an emotional type of thing. How do we feel, like we as a group or as individuals, and the social, who are we? So basically people are asking, can you help me? Could you hug me? Or could you just hear me out or hear me? That's really what's kind of going on in most conversations. Now that you know that, I highly recommend next time you're having conversations, figure out what that's actually, what is that other person saying to you that maybe they didn't say explicitly, but really what they're trying to say. Because it'll surprise you when you start to notice this, once you start to see what it's really about. He also has 4 rules. This was just part of chapter 1. There are 4 rules for setting up a learning conversation with others. Number 1, pay attention to what kind of conversation is occurring, right? We talked about that. Does somebody want to be helped, hugged, or heard? He describes that, his wording. Share your goals and ask others what they are looking for. And number 3, ask about others' feelings and share your own. And number 4, explore if identities are important to this discussion. He goes into that. I'm not going to go into that. I highly recommend you read the book if you thought that was interesting and want to know a little bit more, because I did find it interesting. Chapter 2, he talks about one of the factors that a lot of times, in particular family or people we're really close to, we forget to ask them, what are your goals? Tell me about your goals. Tell me what's going on in your life. Tell me what you're excited about. We forget to ask that of the people that are most close to us. And you know what? We miss out on some incredible conversations when we do that. He wraps up that chapter and he talks about when you're going into a conversation. And a few studies have found this. If you just take 30 seconds and ask yourself, what do I want to talk about? What do I want to discuss? What do I think is possible in this conversation with this person? It can set the tone and be immensely helpful. It helps reduce your anxiety, right? If I'm talking to you and you're a different thinker, there's some anxiety floating around in there. Just straight up, we know it. And that helps to reduce that. Asking open-ended questions is also a great way, hence the coaching. Asking those types of things, very helpful. Also noticing those non-verbal cues that people are getting. Maybe they're bored. Maybe they're looking at their watch. Maybe they're just drifted off. Might be time to change the subject. Might be time to try something else. All that is just fine. And be comfortable experimenting a little bit with your conversations. Another chapter that I found really interesting was chapter 5, which was about connecting amid conflict. And that can be a really big challenge. And I think a lot of people are dealing with this within their families these days in a variety of manners. And that chapter really did a nice job of talking about that. And he gives a couple of things to steer clear of. And I'll share those. You want to steer clear of sarcasm. You want to avoid public criticism of anybody. And you want to express more gratitude, greetings, and apologies when you're in those types of conversations. It helps people to feel heard and opens more doors to actual communication. So just something to think of. Chapter 6 is the one that I found the most interesting. It's about our social identities shape our worlds. And I've known this for years. It's definitely one of the things that's part of conversations in the neurodiverse community is, to get a diagnosis, what does having a diagnosis mean? How does that play out for someone? Because it also creates biases from people interpreting it and ourselves. We have our own internal biases that we may not be aware of, but we are living out. And that was definitely something that was brought up as we were talking in this chapter, as he talked about different ways that social biases have created outcomes in situations, because internally it causes second guessing of people. So they take a lot longer to finish a test, those types of things, thereby bringing down their score, possibly because they don't get all the questions answered. How much does, this wasn't in the book, this is me asking, how much does our ability to find language for what makes us a different thinker, what gives us strengths, where our weaknesses are, how do we also, in having those conversations, this is my question, how do we also, in having those conversations, not inflict bias on ourselves in particular? How do we keep ourselves open to growth and have that growth mindset all the time, to recognize that it's a shifting environment? So chapter 6 really dove into that, and I thought it was interesting. Like I said, I saw how it related to the neurodiverse community. Overall, I would tell you it was a good book and well worth the time to read. I obviously listened to it because that's how I enjoy reading most books, is by having the hard copy and then enjoying listening to it on audio and reading along. Charles Duhigg did a really nice job with this book, and definitely makes it clear that communication is such a priority, and it's well worth stepping back and thinking about it. And if you are in any leadership role, I highly recommend that you put this on your list and take some time to go through it. I believe you will have some nice aha moments, and definitely some things will come up that you can apply within your own environment and space. Thank you for hanging out with me, learning about Supercommunicator. I hope this has inspired you to possibly read that, or at least to go check out a few other things and get some more details on how you could have some more engaging conversations with the people around you. I'm JoyGenea, International Neurodiversity Coach, and so glad that you hung out with me. Thank you. Bye now.